Welcome back, y'all. So today we will be going over more of Immanuel Velikovsky's greatest story ever told in his Worlds in Collision work, the Electric Universe Theory. And I just want to start out with a couple quotes that I like to hold on to. First is, "The eyes only see what the mind is prepared to comprehend." And that is to say, some people will get it and some people won't. I do believe that the dynamic interface of these two systems, the columnal brown dwarf of the purple dawn, entering the heliosphere of the sun, is the greatest dynamic shift. It's the greatest catastrophe that ever happened, in that many of our myths and many of the catastrophes that follow, they are echoes of the same dynamics, the same changes. One example would be, the fall of the Tower of Babel. That may have happened exactly the way the story is told. But my point here is that it is also a echo of this story, of this collision of systems that we are focusing on in this particular clip. So if your mind is prepared to comprehend that, so many spiritual experiences and expressions originate from this dynamic. I may have failed to mention this before, but we have this is the phallus, and this is the yoni. So what we have is the 1 and the 0 interfacing on a grand scale, on a cosmic scale, on such a macro level, that all catastrophes subsequent to that are just micro expressions of the very same dynamics playing out over and over and over repeatedly through consciousness. So I will give many examples of what I'm saying there. So another point that I want to hold on to, another quote is, "To control the occultation is to control the revelation." And what I mean by that is that when people tell us stories or give us mythology, there is a bit of a spell being cast. And that spell is the, small reflections of a larger truth. And if these little stories, these micro stories, have macro representation on a grander scale, then it will draw our belief, and we will have a tendency to commit our volition into believing the story we're being told. Some people would call it our louche. Some people just call it belief. There are many words for it, on many levels. But as long as they are following this storyline, this grand storyline, the tendency of humanity to lend more of their attention and their commitment to the idea will be more and more powerful. And it is, in fact, in its own right, a form of mind control. All lies require a morsel of truth. Just like every joke, all jokes require a hint of truth to it. So I want to give some examples. We'll be going into multicultural perspectives here. We'll talk about, a little bit of Hindu mythology, a little bit of alchemy, a little bit of Judeo-Christian lore, and even a smidge of the Greek myth. So, one point I would need to make is the practice of hieros gamos is a Greek practice of sexual ritual where the characters in the ritual are acting out the roles of quote unquote the gods. And I do believe that eros gamos and the evoking of these characters is a micro expression of this grand schematic that we are looking at here today. And one example is the Shiva lingam, the lingam of Shiva being anointed ritualistically. That is the sun casting its light over the brown dwarf veil. And in perpetual preparation for an interfacing. As I've mentioned before, this is very much a cosmic mind fuck, if you will. But this is the birth ritual of human consciousness. And, another good example would be, the Tower of Babel. Whether the actual story of the Tower of Babel ever really happened or not, this is the original Tower of Babel. And it may have had a micro reflection, an echo in the world of man. They built a tower in an attempt to find God, to know God, which there we have that biblical knowing, and that it fell. It collapsed as a result of their attempt to reach the beyond their place in the world. Another example, and this goes back to hieros gamos, the sex rituals of embodying, the deities, is the story of Lilith. She was the first wife of Adam, and she and Adam had a conflict of dynamic in their intercourse. She wanted to be on top, and he wanted to be on top. And so essentially what we may have is, Lilith is represented with this plane, and Adam is represented by the tower, and we may have as the brown dwarf entered into the rings of the heliosphere, there may have been an up and down, a bobbing back and forth, who's on top, who's on bottom. And here we get the serpent, this symbol of the serpent, the snake, that fluctuation of cycles. And this is, all of this is catastrophilia. This is why we are, many people are obsessed with what kind of catastrophes gave this realm the shape that it has. And it all goes back to these grand stories, which are micro reflections of a macro interface of two systems. So Lilith is a great example, and then once Lilith was gone and that conflict was over, we had Eve. And now Eve becomes when things even out, when the cygnus, the sine wave, comes into a homeostasis and things become more predictable. That's exiting the garden, and now we are in the world. We are world. We are of the world, the mundane, being stirred in the grand cauldron. Another, kind of parable, is the principalities in high places. We are struggling against the principalities in high places. And that is to say that there are cosmic forces reflecting down on us that we will inevitably reenact the conflict between these forces. Some would point out, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but we do have a father, Jupiter, a Son, and a Holy Ghost. And Holy Ghost is HG. HG is the symbol for Mercury. And Mercury is the messenger. It does deliver, it is the heavenly musician. It is that is part of the minutes, seconds, keeping the rhythm, the beat. It's the fundamental of music, because Mercury has the shortest rotation around the sun. Mercury has many complex myths and metaphors tied into the significance of Mercury. So I just want to point out, a lot of what you'll see in these spells and these stories is, pareidolia. You can look that term up, but just think about, is it pareidolia or is it Jung's collective unconscious, that is giving power and credence to these myths and their dynamic interplay. And another term to look up is apophenia, thinking that this, just because of the shape of it, or, the significance of something on the macro, does it have anything whatsoever to do with the micro? Does this have to do with the Shiva's lingam? I would say, according to Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonant field, everything is everything. And in that context, there's no such thing as apophenia. But, that's for each individual to decide if their mind is prepared to comprehend, or is it just apophenia or pareidolia. Also, a couple other mythological parallels come from, one is from Ovid's Metamorphosis. Book number 2 is the story of Phaeton taking control of his father's chariot of the sky, his father being Phobos. And, Phaeton asks him a divine favor. Can I drive your heavenly chariot? And Phobos says, oh, I should have never promised you this one wish. He pleads with him, please take any other wish that you could possibly ask for, just not that. And Phaeton is like, no, I want to ride the chariot. I want the glory. And so when he took control of the chariot, things went quite amok. Things went quite awry. It did not turn out well. And there was a bit of a grand catastrophe as a result of a changing of the guard. Kind of like Uranus to Kronos to Zeus. There was a handing down from the father to the son. So these myths and their potency gains strength by what a wonderful reflection it is of this dynamic of the two systems interfacing with one another, all lending to a collective catastrophilia that many people still today are under. Another example here, I'll just point out, Joshua's longest day. And I'm not very familiar with that story, but I do know that Joshua's longest day has to do with a point in biblical history where the sun stood still in the heavens. And God spoke to man and spoke directly into the consciousness of every human on earth. And Immanuel Velikovsky actually took that myth and did a in-depth dive on the possibility of that fact. Could it be that the earth did stand still? And if it had, on one half of the planet it would have been daytime, and on the other half of the planet it would have been night. And so he began searching on the opposite part of the planet to see if there was a myth of an extended day for other cultures. And sure enough, right around the same time frame, other cultures on the other half of the planet had a myth of an extended day, an extended night. So Joshua's longest day has a cultural counterpart on the other half of the planet that lends to a extended night. So many of these myths that people spend a lot of energy trying to dispel and disprove or disregard, they're not doing themselves any service. In fact, Immanuel Velikovsky and a lot of his work gives a new life to all of the stories and all of the myths. And the most amazing thing about Immanuel Velikovsky's work is the fact that we're still here. We survived all this. And that is truly the definition of grace. The fact that day after day we live in providence. And somehow we got through quite the amazing global catastrophe time and time again. And no matter how many times we re-experience or reinvigorate these conflicts, we make it through to the other side. And there is much positivity to be gleaned from that fact. So I'm going to cut it there. Getting real long with these Immanuel Velikovsky breakdowns, but I hope it makes some sense for everybody. I got to point this out. This is Venus's shell that she stepped onto the Earth, and we'll get into that in the next one. That has to do with Venus colliding with Mars, creating the Grand Scar, the cult of Mithras, and Venus putting a blessing on the Earth, which is quite a grand spell in its own right. All I got for now, y'all. Much love. Peace.